Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development program, and in particular the AWD1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class, I've been doing a series of video presentations. First, based on the textbook for the class, which as you can see is ASP.NET Pro ASP.NET MVC 5, an 8-press text, 5th edition by Adam Freeman. 27 chapters in the book. I have literally done video presentations on all of these. Before we get to chapters 7 through 13, though, alright, I've decided that we're going to go through a tutorial on creating an Entity Framework 6 code first. And that's where we are right now. We're in this. I'm up to here. And then after we get done with that, we're going to go through getting started with Entity Framework Database first. So we're going to do both. All right. Now, the next thing we're supposed to do is install the Entity Framework. The Entity Framework is basically something that's been set up by Microsoft to allow you to kind of bring databases into your ASP.NET application. Now it's more than that because you can use the Entity Framework with virtually anything Microsoft. Alright, you don't have to just use it with ASP.NET. You can use it with other things too. And you can use ASP.NET with either console applications or GUI applications. Now they talk about one way of doing it here, and that is they have you come in and bring in what's called the Package Manager. So if I go to Tools and I go down to NuGet Package Manager and a Package Manager console, it'll bring that up on my screen here, and I can put this in. Install -package, and this is, I believe it's case insensitive because I've tried it with a little I and a little p. But notice there's no space here, but a space here, then Entity Framework. Alright, I can do that, and I will in a minute. But I can also come in, just so you see it, and I can go Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and I can say Manage NuGet Package for Solution. What that will do is it'll bring up a GUIized version of this, and it'll say what's installed right now. So this is the stuff that's installed. I'm not going to look at or read any of it to you. But if I browse, if I click Browse, I'll notice that one of the first things is Entity Framework. So I can choose it there and install it also. Alright? So either one of those will work. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use this one because that's what they show in the book. I'm going to hit Enter. When you hit Enter, if you either get back just text and then your prompt, PM for Package Manager with a greater than sign, or if it's yellow, that means good. If it comes back and it's red, it means there's some kind of an error. So let's hit Enter. And you'll notice that right now, at least, everything is just looks good. So there we put it in. Okay. It's installed a bunch of stuff and it looks good. Now, what did it do? All right. I can't tell you totally what was done here, but I can show you that if I come up to the top here and I go to References, it added references here for the Entity Framework. So we are able to use that to bring that into our program. All right, it does more than that, but just in a nutshell, that's kind of what it's doing. All right, so we brought that in. It says this is one of the few steps you have to do manually. All right. The next thing we want to do is we want to start creating our data model. Remember, we are doing code first, which means that we're going to write a class for courses, we're going to write a class for enrollments, and we're going to write a class for students. Then we'll weave some magic, so to speak, and those will become database tables for us. Now you'll notice it says there's a one-to-many relationship between students and enrollment. In other words, any one student can enroll in one or more classes, and every one classes that are enrolled in can be enrolled in by one or more, or zero or more, really, students. There's also a one-to-many student relationship between course and enrollment. So as it says, a student can be enrolled in 0 or more courses. Every course can have 0 or more students in it. All right? So the author says here, if you try to compile your project before you finish creating all of the classes, you may get compiler errors. So what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to go into our models folder. The models folder is where you typically create the classes that become the tables. All right, so we're going to go in there and we're going to add a class, and that class will be called student. Okay, and after we do, we're going to replace everything that's in there with this. So let's do it and then come back and talk about it. All right, so again, it was called student, singular. So I'm going to close this and this. I'm going to right mouse click on models, and notice there's nothing in models right now. All right, so I'm going to right mouse click on it, choose add class, and the name will be student. And I get kind of a generic vanilla class here that doesn't have much in it. So I'm going to remove that and replace it with what the author said to replace it with. So what do we have here? Well, notice, among other things, we've got an error. But let's talk about what we do have. This says we're going to need to use the system class and the system collection generic class. This is right here, this package, I should say. This is used for this. If I comment this line out, I'm going to get an error both here and here. If I uncomment it, the one error goes away. This is an error because we have not yet created an enrollment class. We'll do that in a minute. All right? Okay. This says that we're creating a class called student under the Contoso University models folder. That's where we are. The class is called student. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 fields in it. The first field will be called ID. It'll be the student ID. It'll also end up being the primary key. It's of type integer. Next, we have a last name field that's of type string, and a first and middle name that's of type string. Why they put first, mid name, I don't know, but that's the way they did it. We also have a date the student enrolled, and that's a date time field. All right, so we've got these. Again, we've got this error, which will be fixed shortly. All right. So I pretty much told you this. The only thing I didn't go over was this line right here. And as the author says, the enrollments property is called a navigation property. It lets us know, for lack of better words, that the student table will have a relationship to the enrollments table. All right. It says in this case the enrollments property will hold all of the enrollment entities related to that student. In other words, if a given student row has 2 related enrollment rows, so if they're enrolled in 2 classes, that student's enrollments navigation property will hold both of those. Typically, those are defined as virtual, so we can take advantage of what's called lazy loading. What that means is those are not brought into the system until they're needed, okay, which makes us run a little faster. The next thing we want to do is we want to create that enrollment class. All right, you'll notice if you look in here, this has an enum. What this means is a student can have a grade of A, B, C, D, or F. I'm going to change it because we don't give D's at Rankin. So I'm going to remove that one. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come through here, copy all this. All right, I'm going to go back to our program, right mouse click on models, which now has student.cs. add another class. All right, and this I believe was enrollment. It is. All right, I get that. Now notice as soon as I did that, that error went away. Okay? Even though I haven't put anything into it yet. Now I have. So we've got this enum, and I said I'm going to change that, and I am. There. Okay? Notice a couple things. First of all, namespace, as we had before. All right? Sorry, that's part 1 lecture. Okay? We've got this enumeration. Again, this says these will be the possible grades we have. The class will be called enrollment. It'll have an enrollment ID, which will be the primary key, a course ID, okay, a student ID, and a grade. And notice that grade has a question mark before it, which means that it's possible that the grade is null. In other words, if today is day 1, let's say, of the AWD1111 class, you don't have a grade yet. Your grade is unknown. I'm getting the error here because we have not yet created the course class. We'll do that momentarily. All right? So, oops, sorry. Okay, way too much stuff open here. So, boom. All right. As it says, the enrollment property will be the primary key. It uses the class name ID instead of ID that we saw earlier. We talked about the enum already. Student ID will be a foreign key, as will course ID. Now we've got to come in and create another file that's called course, or another class that's called course.cs. All right, I'm at 12 minutes, so I'm doing fine for time. So we've got enrollment, we've got student, right mouse click, add class. This again will be called course. We will replace everything that's in it with this. And you'll notice now we don't have any errors. Why? Because this is referencing enrollment, which we already have. All right? Now there's other stuff that we can put up here, just so you know. But I'm not going to go through it right now. This is what's referred to as a data annotation, and it's giving us some information about the database schema. That's why we need to add that using statement right there. It says we'll say more about the database generated attribute later. Basically, it lets you enter a primary key for the course rather than having a database generated. So we're going to enter our own primary key. All right. The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to add what's called a database context file. Now, if you want more information about it, you can go here. But for lack of better words, a lot of times it's referred to as setting up the plumbing for this. It's going to make sure that the database can talk to the code. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder in here. It won't be under models. It'll be under the project itself. Not the solution, but the project. So we're going to right mouse click on here, choose add, new folder, and we're going to call that DAL. And DAL is short for data access layer. That's typically where you end up putting your DB context file. You don't have to do it there, but quite often that's what people do. All right, we're going to call this school context in just a minute. So I'm going to grab all this information. Then I'm going to come in here, right mouse click on my DAL folder, add class, school, context. There it is. We don't want any of that stuff. We're replacing it with this. Okay? So a couple things about what this is. First of all, notice that this inherits from DB context. All right? This school context, that name and that name will become important in a few minutes, probably in the next lecture or so, when we go over how to set up your connection string. But notice what this has. This has linkages, for lack of better words, which says that when we're going to talk about the student class, there'll be a table called students. When we talk about the enrollment class, there'll be a table called enrollments. When we talk about the course class, there'll be a table called courses. All right? You don't have to do it like that, where it's students, etc. It's pretty much conventional that that's how people do it. So as it says, this code creates what is referred to as a DB set property for each entity set. An entity set responds typically to a table. Now, where it says here you can omit this, yeah, there's all sorts of things you can do, but I wish they'd just not put this in here or put a big X through it. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. All right. The name of the connection string, which we'll add later, is passed to the constructor. Says, again, we could have done it another way. I don't care. Again, you'll notice, as I mentioned to you, that our classes are called student, singular, course, singular, and enrollment, singular. Whereas the tables in the database will be called students, plural, courses, plural, and enrollments, plural. Typically, again, that's the way it's done. All right? Now, initializing our database with test data. It says here the entity framework can automatically create, drop, recreate, etc., a database when the application runs. You can also specify that this be done every time the application runs. We can also write a seed method, which seeds the program with data. The default behavior, it says, is to create a database only if it doesn't exist. All right. So in the DAL folder, we're going to create a new class called School Initializer class. And we're going to put that information in there. So in other words, we're going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 students. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 courses. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 enrollment figures. So we're going to create this new thing called School Initializer. All right? And then we're going to come in there and we're going to add all of this code. All right? So the first thing, again, we want to do is in our DAL folder, we want a School Initializer class. We're going to get rid of everything that's in there and replace it with this. Well, I guess I don't want to replace it with that. I want to go back to here, grab all that. I don't know if I copied it or didn't copy it. Looked like I didn't. There's my data. All right. So what we're doing is basically we are seeding the database with data. So we're starting with some original data. We are hard coding it by throwing it in there. All right, just about at the 20-minute point. So let's see, we did that. And as it says, the seed method takes the database object, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and in our web config file, we're going to add this, but we'll do that in the next lecture.